it's Bibiana and welcome to my channel, and if you're new around here, you are welcome. So I know it's been a while, but I'm back and I'm going straight into a Q&A video. You can probably tell by the title, we are talking about marriage today, and this was sparked by a Instagram poll I did recently, one of those Ask Me Anythings. I was really surprised that marriage was one of the most common topics people wanted to discuss or people had questions about. It's kind of funny because I thought it would be more mummy ones, which there were quite a lot of. So I felt it was better if I just focus more on the marriage topics, which I'm going to do now. And also, some of you may know I'm doing a little marriage series with my husband at the moment, Sam, and so some of this questions I've actually saved to do with him because I just felt they'll be better discussed with a male perspective as well, and the other ones which I felt were more, I guess, wifey focused are the ones I'm going to talk about today. So let's dive right in. Okay, so one question that came up quite a lot is this idea of, you make marriage look easy, how do you do it, or how do I have this perfect marriage like yours and Sam's? And I feel bad, I'm about to burst a bubble on this one, but marriage isn't meant to be easy. It's not meant to be perfect. And I really hoped that through hopefully the vlogs and the chatty videos, I've been able to share some real transparent moments and really show you guys some of the struggles that we've had in marriage, but obviously showing you the joys that we have now as well. And I think often we compare what we have behind the scenes to what we see on social media, which is very much a highlight reel. I think one advice I would have is how to have an easier marriage, how to have a better marriage, because I can't tell you how to have an easy or a perfect marriage, is not to compare your spouse to how you were brought up, not to compare your spouse to any exes, and not to compare your spouse to anybody on social media, because your marriage is so unique. And if we're real with ourselves, and I had to evaluate myself as well when I started thinking, oh, my husband doesn't do this, he doesn't do that, and a lot of it I realized, where was I getting those expectations from? And a lot of times it was based on something I'd seen somebody else do. And so I'd say comparison is definitely something to catch yourself when you do it and to stop, because it's a very slippery road to go down. And if we're real with ourselves, we as wives definitely have some areas that we could do with improving on as well. So number one will definitely be a lot of grace in that area, a lot of unconditional love, dying to yourself. When I think about how to make our marriage easier, I always think, how am I going to outserve my husband? We kind of go into it like we are here to almost outserve each other, and having that mindset and thought takes away the thought of what about me, and more like, how can I be a better person? So I guess that question, I just want to make it clear that marriage is not easy, it's not perfect, it's a lot of work, but it sure is beautiful work. So another question that came up quite a bit was about balance. Bibiana, how do you balance it, or how do I find balance as a mom and a wife and career woman? And some of you all are doing studies as well, and being a daughter-in-law and managing the home, and just so many things. Balance. Funny enough, I actually did a video, quite a long video, on balance. I'd say you are not alone, because I definitely get myself off balance. I think there's this idea that because I do quite a lot of things that I am able to balance everything, and I'll be real with you, sometimes I'm in boss chick mode and I really feel like I'm crushing it, and other times I'm quiet, Bibiana, you're going down, and burnout hits me like running into a wall. So I get it, and I go through it as well. And funny enough, I guess you've probably sometimes see there might be a little gap in between videos. Most times it's just because life happens and I'm just busy with all the things that involve with family life, and I'll be real with you, other times it's because I find myself, I'm going down that road of getting a little burnt out, and I've become really good at identifying some of the signs. And because for me, I feel in terms of balance, I know the order of things, and my family comes first. I have to let go of a few things, and as the Lord leads me, sometimes it's taking a step back from my channel, and you really have to be led by the Lord in those areas. But in terms of overall balance, number one, I always say, especially when I get one-on-one opportunities with ladies, is to say, are you doing what God has called you to do? When they present this whole list of things they're trying to balance and they're struggling to balance, and they say, oh, you're doing this, Bibiana. And just to say a few things I'm doing, not to toot my horn or anything, I'm obviously a wife, I'm a mother to 3, so I've got 5-year-old twins and a 2-year-old toddler. I also work outside the home as a dentist, and I also work for Channel Mum, helping them create parenting content, and that's very much something I can do from home. And also I have my channel, and you know, ladies, we have our little side hustles as well as ministry involvement. So I guess as I reel that off, it probably sounds like a lot. I say make sure you're doing what the Lord called you to do. And the reason why I say that and stress that is God can only grace you for what he's called you to do. God can only bless what he's told you to do. You know what I mean? And sometimes we go and run our own race, pick up things that we were never meant to pick up, and it's like, Lord bless it. And he's like, I never told you to do that anyway. I never told you to do that degree. I never told you to take up that extra role, even if it is an extra role in church. I never told you to add all these other things to your plate, you know? And I always have this analogy in my head about like plates, because I guess that's how we all think about it, how much we can carry. And some people have a plate this big, and some people have a bigger plate. And sometimes we look at other people and their plate and think all the stuff they're doing, oh, I could do that, I can do that. And then you do it, and then you find yourself burning out. And what we don't often see, especially because we're comparing our behind the scenes to highlight reels, you don't see maybe A, they might have been graced to do that and called to do that, and the Lord will, you know, enable them to do it by his grace. Or B, they might have a certain structure or support that enables them to do those certain things. And so I really just encourage that idea of taking your eyes off other people, other women, what other wives are doing, and fix your eyes literally on Jesus and be like, what have you called me to? What do you want me to do? And in doing that as well, making sure your priorities, now you know these list of things you're meant to do, really line up with God's order. That's so important. And I stress that because the order is obviously God first, but not only God first, the foundation. So this is your plate, and God is the foundation of everything you have to do. So as a wife, as a mother, as a career woman, and so even when it comes to family, making sure even the fact that your husband is above your children, more important than your children. And that can be an area that a lot of us struggle with, especially when we move from being wives, not just wives, to wives and mothers, is that idea of still keeping your husband a priority. And if you're not sure if your husband feels like he's a priority, because you have to make sure not only that you're making a priority, but he knows that as well, ask him, you know, say, do you feel like you're a priority above the kids to me? Do you feel like you're a priority above my career? And, you know, be prepared for the answer, whether it's one you want to hear or you don't want to hear. And if it's one you weren't expecting, then just, you know, be prepared to make the necessary change. And the next thing is just making sure that you are in the Word, that you're reading God's Word, having quiet time. Prayer is so important because it's a lot, guys. It's a lot. Times when we have a lot to balance, often it's something that's stretching us, and we don't realize the Lord who's called us to do these things will enable us to do it if we lean on him for strength, and we're not trying to do things in our own strength. As some of us are trying to do all this stuff in our own strength, and it wasn't meant to be that way. And often I feel that we have all these questions like, how do I do this? How do I balance that? I think sometimes the answers to those questions are in the quiet time that we never had. And thirdly would be schedule. Like on a practical level, I'll be with you, schedule, routine. It's so important to even develop that now. What time are you guys going to have your meals? You have a meal plan. And this was stuff I had to really transition to doing as a wife. I mean, it gets a whole new ballgame when you have kids, but just as a wife, I started putting those schedules and routines into effect. I think what helped me as well is just having, I guess, the opportunity to be mentored, more like a life-on-life mentor, and seeing other women in their home environment that I really admired who seem to be balancing this well. And I look at them like, I'm struggling as a wife, and you'll have 2 kids or 3 kids. I don't know how you do it. And I used to go there and see just the level of, you know, obviously, like I said, spending time with God, quiet time, you know, being prayerful, but also the real practical nitty gritty. Like they had routines, they had structure, and that's just really important. Planning ahead is just so important. And I was only going to mention 3 because, like I said, I have a whole video, but I'll just briefly mention this one, which is about getting help. The Proverbs 31 woman had help, okay, and she was entrepreneurial. She had her kids, she had a husband, and she literally got herself help so she could do what the Lord called her to do. So how are we any different? So you are your best self when you are with your husband. You're your best self when you're with your family members. Because sometimes we think, oh, I'm fine, I'm here, but you're here in body, but not in spirit. And I even found that when I thought, oh, I've balanced it all by myself. You kind of like to give yourself a little pat on the back when you feel like I did this all by myself kind of thing. But then I started realizing I was present, but I wasn't present in spirit, because then I might as well say something and be like, I told you this yesterday when we were talking. And obviously I wasn't really with it because I was probably half asleep or just being really mentally drained. And then even in my attitude would come out, I'm there in person, but I'm bitter, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated, and a lot of it is because I've taken on too much, I've got the balance wrong, and I'm heading down that burnout route. So just really encourage you to just take those principles on board, and I'll link the video here as well, just so you can check it out. And if there's one point you feel like you really want broken down, whether it's routine, whether it's self-care, whether it's meal planning or anything like that, just let me know and I would love to help in that area. Okay, so another question was, what is my top must-read book for young married couples? And again, similar questions about recommendations for marriage books or books for wives. So I'm going to name, I do like marriage books, so it's hard to narrow them down, so I will link some down below. But I guess two of my favorite overall marriage books, by these ones I mean you can read with your husband as well if he's into reading, or maybe try audible version as well. I really do encourage couples to try and read together The Meaning of Marriage and, you know, the famous 5 Love Languages. I think those two are definitely two of my top reads. And in terms of books for wives, I would recommend Power of Praying Woman. It's definitely probably one of my number one, even though I haven't finished reading it. I started reading it, but I found out about a book club which is happening, so I thought I'd wait for the book club and just join the other ladies doing that, which is next month if you guys are into book clubs. It's in the UK. And also Loving Him Well. So those are two which obviously for women to read, and I definitely encourage you guys to check those out. And if you're not married, I think one of my favorite ones would be Things I Wish I Knew Before I Got Married. And that's written by the same guy that wrote 5 Love Languages. So yeah, definitely recommend that one. Again, in terms of preparation, that's definitely one book I wish I'd read before I got married. Okay, so the next question is, what was your biggest struggle as a newlywed? So I would definitely say one of our big struggles was finances, and I've mentioned this before in the video I did with Sam, where we really go in and share our story and our mistakes and our pitfalls and where we were then as newlyweds to, I guess, where we are now. And hopefully you can learn from some of those mistakes. I definitely had a lot of really lovely feedback about that video, so I'll link it down below. And if you just want further information on how to handle your finances as newlyweds. Other struggles I've had have been with submission, with communication, and, you know, I'm still working through some of those now, but we're definitely in a lot better place than I used to be. But I guess those were my early struggles, you know. Never been married before, guys, and a lot of us take that for granted, that this is all very new. If you want to know the biggest area, I don't actually think I've mentioned this one before, for many reasons, because it was a very personal one to me, but I definitely feel probably more comfortable now, at least bringing it up and sharing it in this video. Is one of my biggest struggles was intimacy, guys. It was I was a virgin when we got married, and I am so excited to even say that, because I think it's so important to wait until marriage, and I know it's not easy, but it's one of the best decisions I ever made. But I had some issues I hadn't dealt with before, which were only brought up when I became intimate. Never been with a man before in that way, and I hadn't dealt with them in my past, and yeah, it caused some issues with me. I know it's hard, I guess, because I'm just saying it now. I haven't really prepared my answer, it just kind of came out now. But it just caused a lot of issues early on in our marriage, to be honest. And I think because we had children so soon after, within a few months I was pregnant with twins, and we welcomed twins within a year of getting married. You have kids sometimes, unfortunately, it can change the sex life. It can, and it can change intimacy, both in terms of, timing and being tied as parents. But I think for me it was my body changed significantly. I went from being like a pretty much professional athlete body kind of figure to birthing two very large 16-pound plus of a baby, and my body changed. So coupled with some of the issues I was dealing with before I hadn't addressed properly before marriage or before kids, I then had, you know, some body image issues as well, and that just kind of stacked on top of each other. And before we knew, early on in marriage, it just became something that was pretty much eating me up alive kind of thing. And I managed to hide it quite well from my husband. I didn't want to speak about it to anyone. I think it's one thing not to want to tell other people or your business, but it's another thing to keep things from your husband, because you are meant to be one flesh. And I heard it before, I knew we were one flesh. I was happy to discuss other challenging issues with my husband, but this was one I just was like, no, this is my issue. I almost felt embarrassed about it. I just wanted to keep to myself. But thankfully, I have a very good husband, very discerning husband, and he was able to tell that things were wrong. But unfortunately, when I realized he knew some of the issues I was having, it kind of changed for me, being, I probably should have been like, oh, okay, now we can talk about it. But I became really like annoyed and almost bitter about him actually knowing, and I started pushing him away. And we don't want to start rejecting our husbands because of some things that we're dealing with. It opens up very dangerous paths for our husbands, because intimacy, sex is so, so important in a marriage. But to cut a long story short, one of the things I did eventually is open up, talk to my husband, became more transparent about how I was feeling. And, it was one of the most relieving moments ever. And I think it's funny because, well, it's not really funny. I think it's ironic because we know the enemy tries everything before we're married to get us together. And then when we're married, tries everything to stop us being intimate together. And this was definitely one I saw as an attack in a way. I'm just grateful I was able to realize that, we were able to realize that, and then just come together, talk, be vulnerable and transparent, because you are literally meant to be one with your husband, naked and unashamed, and that's the way it's meant to be. And if you find that you're not feeling comfortable being intimate with your husband, you have to make sure you communicate, talk about these things, where really get down to nitty-gritty. What does he want? What do you want? And then these were things I kind of shied away from initially, but with time and some good old wise counsel and just being more intentional about studying on the area, we kind of got out of that, or I got out of that struggle that I was having. Ooh, just felt like I just downloaded a whole lot there. I guess another struggle, if I have time to mention that one, would be, it's not so heavy, it's struggle with losing myself. That's one thing I really struggled with in the early years of marriage. Just I almost felt like I was losing my identity. This was even before kids. A lot of us talk about mum guilt, but we don't talk much about wife guilt. And what I mean is, I would just feel guilty as a wife if I wasn't with my husband all the time. I kind of started wrapping my life and my identity around my husband. If he wanted to do something, I wanted to make sure I was there, wanted to make sure the house was perfect, food was cooked, all the, I guess, wifey roles that and pressure I put on myself to fulfill. But then what happened is, I noticed my husband, he is very much an extrovert. He's very much a people person. He didn't, apart from the boundaries obviously we had set up within our marriage, his life didn't change that much. He was still able to go out with his boys. He was still playing basketball consistently. Heck, if there was a stag do, he was happy to, obviously we discussed it, but he never really felt the kind of guilt I would feel if I had a hen do to go to. As well as a lot of my close friends, a lot of people from our wedding, I kind of lost contact with, and I blame myself more for that, because I just started pouring so much into my marriage and spending more time with my husband that I kind of neglected, friends. And we need friends. Obviously your husband comes first, but you still need your friends. And it can start leading to being bitter, and that's what happened. I started thinking, well, why is he so comfortable doing all these things? Why is he happy going out with his friends and his life hasn't changed, and I'm doing all this stuff? And I remember my husband just turned around one day, he's like, babe, you need a hobby. I was like, what am I not doing enough? And I almost felt guilty. He's like, no, he was just kind of telling me he needed his space. You could tell I was like kind of Sam and Bibi all over him all the time. Where are you going? What are you doing? Do you want me to come with you? I was just like stalker wife for real. And so one of my hobbies, something I started and stopped because I just thought, oh, Sam's not really into it, was, you know, photography and vlogging. I kind of started very early on, not like I put it out or anything. It'd be funny if I can find some really old clips to record things, and he'll be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm just recording stuff. But he'd just like roll his eyes, which I realized is just sometimes just a typical guy thing. A lot of them are not into these things that we may be into. And so I kind of thought, oh, he doesn't like it. My husband doesn't even have social media, then I shouldn't be doing this. So I stopped it, and it was something that I used to be super excited about, and he knew that. He could see how I came alive when I was creative and creating content, even though it was just for myself. And he just reminded me of that, and I almost felt like he gave me permission, but he finally kind of released me to feel more comfortable to just go and do something on my own. When I think about it, Channel's birthed out of a lot of things, but one of them was me almost getting myself depressed as a new wife, where I was, you know, I didn't have any other hobbies. I distanced myself from friends, and what is now was initially a hobby thankfully turned into something else, and I definitely have my husband to thank for encouraging me to get back into it. But you know, just not losing yourself, and that's a struggle I had at the beginning, and one I would encourage all wives to just be cautious of, because in doing so it only leads down a slippery road of a lot of bitterness, and as much as you try and suppress it for a bit, it'll come out in some way, shape or form. And it's funny because one clip that comes to mind is, I don't know if you've all seen Coming to America. Do you remember when the woman was like, yes sir, I'll do whatever you say?
What kind of music do you like?
Whatever kind of music you like.
Look, I know what I like, but I would like to know what you like. For instance, do you have a favorite food?
Yes.
Good! What is your favorite food?
Whatever food you like.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me, not to that extreme, but me a bit, when I was just like that mindset of I have to do everything my husband does, and men don't like that. They really don't. They married you as a unique individual. Yes, you're one now. That always reminds me, I want the woman I met when we were dating, and I want to see that woman again. And okay, I'm just going to wrap things up with this final question, and sorry, you may notice the lighting is looking a little bit different. I had to attend to our little one. The final question was asking for any marriage lessons and wisdom. So with that one, I really can only tell you my number one recommended place to get ultimate wisdom about marriage, and that is this. It's the Bible, guys. It's the Word of God. I can't stress for you enough how much this has completely changed my thought process and helped me as a wife in terms of how I approach my marriage. You know, granted, books are great, podcasts are great, sermons are great, but if we don't make this our ultimate foundation in how we navigate life, especially marriage, then we're gonna have some problems. What I did early on in marriage was I found every single scripture I could find in the Bible about being a wife, about marriage, even about the home and everything, you know, that I was preparing to be as a wife. And then I just studied them, meditated on them, and it was really just an opportunity for me to find out where am I falling short, because this is the standard. This for me is the gold standard, the foundation, and wherever I am, my job was always to bridge that gap. It's nice to see so much content out there about marriages. If we don't have this as our final authority, we often won't be able to rightly divide what someone else is saying as being biblically correct or just their opinion. And granted, some people have some great wisdom that's based on their opinion, but we still have to be careful that we're not, you know, listening to things or applying things into our marriage that are not they're not biblical. So that to me is the number one tip. So I would also use it as an opportunity to find out areas that I was struggling with. And there were a lot, and thankfully it's all covered in here. So I was struggling with this whole submission thing, and it's covered in Ephesians 5. I was struggling with, you know, my mouth and being a nagging wife, and there are tons of quite funny analogies of what it means to be a nagging wife. And it's better for a man to live like in a corner on a rooftop or in the desert than with a nagging wife. And I was like, dang, is that how bad it is when I nag my husband? So I got a lot of conviction through reading this word in that area, and even just in my tone and how I approach my husband, how I speak to him, and it's covered here in how I can be more respectful and a quiet and gentle spirit and all that stuff in 1 Peter. So I would definitely encourage studying the word, and I would definitely list some scriptures down below if you want on some of the key ones I feel are really important for wives to memorize, to meditate on, and really be intentional about applying to their life. But in terms of other tips, I would say is, I've got something else, is I've got this is something I do that's really helped me, is I have journals, but I have one particular journal, which is this one that I use for my marriage, and it's just packed full of any wisdom or tips I get, whether it be from mentors or something I hear, some scriptures which relate to me as a wife, some prayers, affirmations over my marriage. I even list anything my husband's praying for. I do ask him, is there anything you want me to pray for you about, and I write it down. And it may seem a little cheesy, but it works for me, and it's pretty much my marriage is awesome, and that's the journal, and that's what it's about. And it's just reminding me of the amazing things in my marriage, and I do this intentionally. One thing I always talk about, whether it's parenting or marriage, we have to be intentional, because marriage is not easy. There's going to be times when it gets tough, and if you've not filled yourself up with the word of God, or that this could be an attack of the enemy, and he hates marriage, then you're going to fall for his lies. And so sometimes I just have this as a reminder. There's gratitude pages of what I'm grateful for my husband for, especially on those days you don't feel like being grateful as a wife. I remember for this husband I prayed, and then I just remind myself some of the amazing things he does. And I've also found this beneficial in seasons where my husband's going through stuff, because sometimes we forget our husbands, they take on a lot, they have a lot of responsibility, and he needs some encouragement from me. So I've just got some tips on how I can encourage my husband. I even made a whole video on how to encourage your husband as well, and so that's all packed in here as well, just so I can be the best and most intentional wife I can be, a better wife. Okay, so I just want to end with some encouragement that's definitely helped me in different seasons of marriage. So one of them is, a rough patch does not define your marriage. Pray and press through, it's just a moment. Next would be, it is better to pick your husband's socks from in front of the laundry basket than nagging him to do so. And I feel like I learned that in my first year of marriage, for sure. And also I found there are worse things than unemployment, a forgotten birthday, or a forgotten anniversary. We have to keep everything in perspective, ladies. I would choose a devoted husband and father over material things any day. And I say lastly, and probably the most important thing, is that you and your husband, you share a common enemy, and your husband is not the enemy. Okay? Alright, that's definitely it from me, and thank you so much for watching today's video. I really hope you found this Q&A discussion on marriage helpful, and if you have any further questions or video suggestions, be sure to leave a comment down below. I read all of them, and if you just want to discuss anything further about this video, I would love to know your thoughts and really just continue the discussion in the comment section. I really want to see this more as a community where we're able to encourage each other and be edified, and really just be the best women, wives, mothers God has called us to be. So that's it from me. I really hope you have a great day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.
I wanna be real with you. Whom have I to impress? You show me